The gospel reading today picks up where the Beatitudes left off last week. To you who hear me, I say, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, and pray for those who maltreat you. Love, do good, bless, and pray for all people, including your enemies and those who wish to do you harm. Now, love of enemies is a very radical position for Christians and how we live in the world. It's how Jesus preached to the disciples. There's not a crowd there. Jesus is preaching to the disciples in this gospel passage. The disciples, being faithful Jews, knew the heart of the matter of love in Jewish law. You shall love your Lord your God with all your heart. You shall love the Lord with all your soul and mind, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. This time in their journey with Jesus as followers, Jesus is inviting them to expand their vision of love. This way of loving now includes that you love all people, even those who want to do you harm. Give when people can't give back to you. Love your family and your enemy and your neighbor. Love freely, unconditionally, without limits, without a checklist that says, here's what you have to do to pay me back. Love of enemy and those who want to harm us is both an attitude and an action. It is an attitude of the heart. It's a desire to want to do good. And it is an action of doing good, of blessing, and of prayer. Now, this call to love is not grounded in this God who judges, but the end of the gospel says this is grounded in a God who is compassionate. Be merciful, compassionate, as God is full of mercy. Jesus calls us to be like the God of mercy and not the God who judges. It takes a tremendous amount of courage to not play God, to judge others like God. It takes an act of courage to walk in love as a disciple and let God be God. And let us call to be like Christ who calls us to love. Be merciful. Forgiveness is one of the hardest things we can do as Christians. Jesus says, do others as you would have them do to you. But if a person once strikes you on one cheek, turn the other cheek. Give, do not do them harm. Give. Forgive them. Again, forgiveness is freeing, but it's very difficult to do because too often we carry a lot of anger and hurt with us in trying to forgive. But freedom comes from forgiveness in two ways. One, it frees the enemy by giving that person an opportunity to do a second chance to do good. And it frees the forgiver and allows them to let go of the grudges and the hate and the anger and the resentment and the freedom from being victim to be whole again. Now, don't get me wrong. Freedom does not mean forgive and forget and everything's hunky-dory. Forgiveness means to forgive means to forgive and remember without any of the baggage, without any of that heavy load of resentment or ill will. It is to forgive and remember in a freedom of love. This week, let us pay attention to places in our hearts that need forgiveness, and also places in our hearts where we need to be forgiven. How do we allow that God of mercy, that merciful God of love and compassion to wash over us and fill us with love that comes with no expectations. A love that fills us and challenges us, too, to expand our vision of love, that nudges the corners, the edges of our love out a little bit wider. This day, this week. Amen.